My mother-in-law moved in with us. 3 months later, I found her real plan hidden in my basement, and my entire world fell apart. When Sarah lost her apartment after her landlord sold the building, helping her seemed like the right thing to do. She was 62, retired, alone, and struggling to make rent on her fixed income. My husband Mark told me, "It's just temporary until she gets back on her feet." I said yes because I was trying to be a good person, because family matters, because maybe I was trying to prove something to myself about being generous. Big mistake. The first week was actually normal. Sarah cleaned our kitchen, cooked dinner, played with our kids. Look how perfect she is as a grandmother, I told myself. Maybe I'd been wrong about her all these years. Maybe the tension I'd felt for the past decade was all in my head. She baked cookies with my 6-year-old daughter Emma and taught my 9-year-old son Jake how to play chess. She organized my spice rack and folded laundry without being asked. Mark seemed happier than he'd been in months. "See?" he'd say, "this is working out perfectly." But the second week, things started to shift. Sarah began acting like she owned the place. She reorganized our refrigerator without asking, moving all my carefully arranged meal prep containers to make room for her organic vegetables and expensive yogurts. She changed the kids' bedtime routines, letting them stay up an extra hour because children need more freedom to express themselves. She started complaining to Mark about me. "This house is so dark," she'd say when I walked into the room. "Jenna makes too much noise in the kitchen in the mornings. The children can barely sleep." When I tried to push back gently, suggesting we stick to the kids' established bedtime, Mark said, "She's just adjusting." Be patient. She's been through a lot. The third week, Sarah started redecorating. She moved furniture around while I was at work, claiming the living room had terrible feng shui. She took down pictures from our walls, family photos, artwork we'd carefully chosen, and replaced them with her own collection of nature prints and inspirational quotes. "It looks more open this way," she'd say when I'd come home to find our wedding photo moved from the mantel to a drawer. More peaceful, less cluttered. Meanwhile, Mark's behavior was getting weird too. He'd use his phone secretively, turning the screen away when I walked by. He'd disappear into the basement for hours at night with tools and boxes. When I asked what he was doing, he'd say, "Mom and I are working on house plans, trying to create more space for her." I thought that was reasonable. After all, the woman was a guest in our home. Maybe she needed a bit more privacy, a proper bedroom instead of sleeping on the couch. By the fourth week, Mark stopped coming upstairs at night entirely. "I'm sleeping downstairs with Mom," he said when I found him making a bed on the basement floor. "She's elderly and gets lonely. She has nightmares sometimes." That's when I started getting suspicious. Sarah was 62, not 92. She seemed perfectly capable of sleeping alone. But every time I brought it up, Mark would get defensive. "She raised me by herself," he'd say. "The least I can do is make sure she feels safe." The fifth week, Sarah confronted me directly. "Jenna," she said one morning while the kids were at school, "we need to make some changes in this household." "What kind of changes?" "You're very dominant. It's affecting this family negatively." My mouth fell open. "What do you mean?" "Mark is unhappy. The children are stressed. Maybe you need to step back a little. Let the natural order reassert itself." Natural order? What was she talking about? "Look," she continued, settling into my kitchen chair like she was conducting a business meeting. "I know you mean well, but you're micromanaging everything. The children's schedules, Mark's eating habits, even how we arrange the furniture. It's suffocating." That night I talked to Mark. "Your mother wants me to step back. What does that mean?" Mark gave me evasive answers, not meeting my eyes. "She just wants everyone to be comfortable. You do tend to control things sometimes." "I'm trying to maintain our family routines. Maybe the routines need to change." "I'm not comfortable with this, Mark. Jenna, please don't create drama. Mom's been through enough." Drama? I was creating drama in my own house? The sixth week, things got worse. Sarah started instructing the children directly, undermining my parenting. "Don't raise your voices when your mother talks to you," she'd tell them, as if I was some kind of ogre. I wasn't yelling. I never yelled. She'd give them snacks right before dinner, then act confused when they wouldn't eat their meals. "Children know what their bodies need," she'd say when I protested. "You shouldn't force them to eat." Sarah was constantly talking to Mark against me. I could hear her through the thin basement ceiling. "This woman is tearing our family apart," she'd say. "You were so much happier before her. Remember how peaceful your life used to be?" Mark stopped making eye contact with me. Even simple conversations became strained. He'd sigh when I asked him about his day, like talking to me was an enormous burden. The 7th week, Sarah attacked me directly. "This is my son's house," she said when I asked her to please not rearrange the kids' toys while they were at school. "You're a guest here. I'm Mark's wife. This is our home. A temporary arrangement." Those words cut so deep I couldn't breathe. Mark was standing right there. He said nothing. Nothing. Later that night, I cornered him. "Did you hear what your mother said to me? She's just frustrated. You've been pretty hostile to her." "Hostile?" I asked her not to reorganize Emma's dollhouse. "You asked her like she was a child. She's my mother, Jenna. Show some respect." The 8th week, I decided to go to marriage counseling. Mark refused to come. "It's unnecessary," he said. "You're overreacting to a temporary situation." The counselor, Dr. Martinez, met with me alone. I explained everything: the constant criticism, the boundary violations, the way Mark had changed. "This is manipulation," she said simply. "Classic triangulation, and your husband is enabling it. So what can I do? You need to set clear boundaries. If they're not respected, there need to be consequences." She gave me a book about emotional abuse and gaslighting. Reading it felt like someone had written about my exact situation. The 9th week, I laid out my boundaries to Sarah. "This is my house," I said calmly but firmly. "If you want to stay as a guest, you need to respect my rules." Sarah laughed, actually laughed. "What rules?" "You don't rearrange my belongings without asking. You don't undermine my parenting decisions. You don't complain about me to my husband. And you sleep in the guest room we've prepared for you, not in the basement with Mark. Or what? You'll have to find somewhere else to live." Sarah's face darkened. "We'll see about that." She ran to Mark and told him everything, but with her own spin. Mark came at me furiously. "Did you threaten to kick my mother out?" "I set reasonable boundaries. She's family, Jenna. Family doesn't come with conditions." "Marriage does, Mark. Marriage comes with the condition that we put each other first. This has gone too far. You're being cruel to an elderly woman who has nowhere else to go." That night, Mark slept in the basement again. He'd been sleeping there every night for 2 weeks now. The 10th week, I started losing my mind. I felt like a stranger in my own house. The kids were confused and acting out. Emma had started wetting the bed again. Jake was having nightmares. Sarah kept telling them, "Your mother is tired, don't bother her," whenever they tried to talk to me, like I was some kind of invalid who couldn't handle normal family interactions. Mark barely stayed home anymore. After work, he'd go straight to the basement. He'd spend hours down there with his mother, working on their mysterious projects. He wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't look me in the eye. When I tried to initiate intimacy, he'd make excuses. "I'm exhausted," he'd say. "Mom needs help with something." Our physical relationship had completely died. One night, desperate for answers, I decided to search Mark's laptop. I found communications with a law firm, divorce papers. My heart stopped. My hands shook as I read the email thread. The email read, "Wife is manipulative and unstable, exhibits controlling behavior and has been hostile to my elderly mother who has nowhere else to live. This is best for the children. My mother can serve as a witness to her erratic behavior." Sarah was orchestrating this. She was systematically turning Mark against me, documenting everything I said and did, twisting it into evidence of my supposed instability, and it was working. The next day, while Mark was at work, Sarah talked to me with a smile that made my blood run cold. "My son is leaving you," she said, sitting at my kitchen table like she owned it. "And the children will stay with him." "That's impossible." "It's not, because I'll testify that you're an unfit mother. I've been documenting everything, Jenna. Your angry outbursts, your controlling behavior, your hostility toward family. I never had angry outbursts. That's not how Mark will remember it. That's not how I'll testify. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Why are you doing this? Because you ruined his life. Who were you before him? Nobody. A struggling nurse with student loans and no family? Mark gave you everything. This house, these children, a life you never could have had on your own. And how do you repay him? By trying to keep him from his mother. I never tried to keep you apart. You resented me from day one. You made it clear I wasn't welcome in my son's life. Well, now it's my turn. That night, while Mark was supposedly working late, I decided to go down to the basement. I wanted to see what they'd been building down there. The basement had been completely transformed. It was like a second home had been built. New drywall, fresh paint, carpet, even a mini kitchen with a small refrigerator and microwave. Sarah's clothes were hanging in a makeshift closet. Mark's childhood photos covered an entire wall. His school pictures, sports trophies, family vacations. None of them included me. There was a comfortable seating area with Mark's favorite chair from college, the one I'd asked him to get rid of years ago because it didn't match our living room furniture. Now I understood where it had gone, and then I opened what I thought was a storage closet. Inside were files, thick manila folders, dozens of them, all labeled and organized like a law office. All about me. There was a file labeled Jenna's Instability Documentation. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages I'd sent Mark, normal conversations, but highlighted to make me look demanding or unreasonable. There were fake doctor reports with letterheads I didn't recognize, claiming I'd been treated for anxiety and depression. Fake witness statements from neighbors I'd never spoken to, claiming I'd been hostile or erratic. Another file. Financial Control Plan. Detailed information about Mark's accounts, how to access them, how to hide assets, how to leave me with nothing. There were copies of documents I'd never seen. Apparently, Mark had been moving money into accounts with only his name on them. Another file, Child Custody Strategy. Plans for how they would turn Emma and Jake against me, how they would create an unstable mother narrative in court. There were notes about my work schedule, my student loans, even my therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. Somehow they'd gotten information about those too. At the bottom of the pile, there was one more file, Previous Daughters-in-Law. I opened it with trembling hands. My mouth went dry. Mark's first wife's photos were there. Jennifer. I'd seen her picture before, a pretty blonde woman who Mark said had abandoned him and their 2 children when they were toddlers. The divorce papers were there, but they told a different story than what Mark had told me, and a note in Sarah's handwriting, "Successfully removed. Children no longer attempt to see her." Second wife, Rachel. A brunette with kind eyes who Mark claimed had been unstable and couldn't handle family life. Same system, same false documentation, same result. There were photos of other women too, women I didn't recognize, with different last names. Sarah's nephew's wife, her brother's daughter-in-law, all with the same type of documentation, the same pattern of systematic destruction. I was the 3rd wife, but I wasn't the 3rd victim. I was maybe the 8th or 9th. Sarah had done this before, multiple times. She had sabotaged every one of Mark's marriages and probably several other family relationships too. This was her system, perfected over years of practice. I took photos of everything with my phone, every page, every document, every fake report. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady, but I forced myself to document everything. Then, I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it and went upstairs. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room that Sarah had rearranged with her inspirational quotes on the walls where my family photos used to be, and tried to process what I'd discovered. This wasn't just manipulation. This was organized, systematic destruction. Sarah was a predator who had been doing this for years, maybe decades. And Mark wasn't just an enabler. He was a co-conspirator. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "I need to come in for an emergency," I said. "I have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and document forgery." I met with my lawyer, Sarah Chen, that afternoon. I showed her all the photos from the basement files. "This is serious," she said, scrolling through image after image. "This isn't just a custody dispute. This is an organized manipulation campaign. Evidence fraud, defamation, conspiracy to commit fraud. These fake medical documents alone are federal crimes." "What can we do?" "Everything. We're calling the police, the FBI if necessary. This woman has been systematically destroying families for years." "What about Mark?" "He's complicit. These documents show he was actively participating in the fraud. He's going to face charges too." That day, when Sarah and Mark came home from whatever they'd been doing together, police cars were waiting in our driveway. Sarah was arrested for fraud, document forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. Mark was charged with aiding and abetting, fraud, and conspiracy. I'll never forget the look on Sarah's face when the officers put the handcuffs on her. First shock, then anger, then pure, undiluted hatred. "This bitch ruined us," she screamed as they led her to the police car. "She went through our private things. She violated our privacy." Mark said nothing. He just hung his head like a child who'd been caught breaking something valuable. The children saw this scene. Emma started crying. Jake asked me, "Mommy, why are the police taking Daddy and Grandma?" "Because they did some very bad things," I said, pulling them both close. "But you're safe now. We're all safe now." The court process took 6 months, not 3. Sarah's case was more complex than anyone had initially realized because of the multiple victims across several states. During the investigation, more evidence came to light. Sarah had been running this scam for over 20 years. She had files on women dating back to the 1990s. The FBI found a storage unit she'd been renting that contained boxes of similar documentation on other victims. She'd targeted not just daughters-in-law, but any woman who threatened her control over the men in her family. She'd destroyed her own sister's marriage in the 1980s. She'd driven away multiple girlfriends of her nephews. She'd even targeted her own daughter-in-law from a previous relationship, Mark's stepmother, back when Mark was a teenager. Sarah was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for organized fraud, identity theft, document forgery, and conspiracy. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to her victims. Mark received 3 years probation and was ordered to pay child support for all the children he'd been systematically alienated from their mothers. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. With all the evidence of his financial manipulation and conspiracy, he couldn't claim anything. Full custody of Emma and Jake stayed with me. But the most shocking discovery came during the sentencing phase. I received a phone call from a woman named Jennifer, Mark's first wife, the one from Sarah's files. "I saw the news," she said, "about Sarah's arrest. I need to tell you something." We met at a coffee shop. Jennifer looked tired, older than her years, like she'd been carrying a heavy weight for a long time. "I thought I was going crazy," she said. "When I was married to Mark, the same thing happened." Sarah moved in after her apartment flooded. That was her excuse then. She started changing everything, turning Mark against me. How long did it last? 2 years. 2 years of hell. She convinced Mark I was bipolar, that I was having paranoid delusions about her. She got me committed to a psychiatric facility twice. By the time I figured out what was happening, I'd lost everything. My blood ran cold. The children? I haven't seen them in 10 years. Mark convinced them I abandoned them, that I was mentally ill and dangerous. They won't even take my calls. Jennifer pulled out a folder that looked disturbingly familiar. I kept everything, all the fake medical reports she created about me, all the lies she told the court. I tried to fight it, but who was going to believe me over a concerned grandmother and her stable son? I stared at the documents. They were almost identical to what I'd found in Sarah's basement files about me. The same handwriting, the same fake doctor signatures, the same psychological evaluation templates. "There's more," Jennifer said. "After I saw the news about Sarah's arrest, I hired a private investigator. We found at least 12 other women, not just Mark's wives, other daughter-in-laws in the extended family, her nephew's wives, her brother's daughter-in-law, even some of Mark's cousins' wives. It's a pattern that goes back decades." Jesus Christ. She's a serial family destroyer, Jenna. and she's been getting away with it for 25 years. That night, I called my lawyer again. Within a week, we had contacted every victim Jennifer's investigator had found. Rachel, Mark's second wife, was living in Oregon, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She'd lost custody of her daughter completely after Sarah convinced the court she was an unfit mother. She'd been so traumatized by the experience, she'd never remarried, never had more children. Diana, the nephew's wife, had been driven to a complete nervous breakdown and lost her house in the legal battles Sarah orchestrated. She'd ended up homeless for 6 months. Mary, who'd been married to Sarah's brother, told us how Sarah had convinced the entire family that Mary was stealing from elderly relatives. Mary ended up divorced, broke, and estranged from her own children who believed Sarah's lies. Lisa, another nephew's wife, had been targeted when she tried to have Sarah investigated for elder abuse of their grandfather. Sarah had created an elaborate campaign to make Lisa look like she was having a psychotic break. Each woman had the same story. Sarah would identify them as threats to her control, move into their homes under some pretext, then systematically destroy their relationships and credibility until they lost everything. We formed what we called the Sarah Survivors Support Group. It sounds dramatic, but that's what we were. Survivors of systematic psychological warfare. Together, we filed a class action lawsuit against Sarah for systematic harassment, defamation, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Decades of the same pattern, the same fake documents, the same manipulation tactics used across multiple states and jurisdictions. The case made national news. Serial mother-in-law destroys families for sport. The manipulation monster next door. Family predator sentenced. The headlines were sensational, but they weren't wrong. During the extended trial, even more victims came forward, women who'd been too scared or too ashamed to speak up before. The final count was 18 families destroyed over 25 years. Sarah's defense attorney tried to paint her as a protective mother who was looking out for her family. But the evidence was damning. The fake documents, the systematic planning, the calculated destruction of human lives over decades. Her final sentence was increased to 12 years in federal prison for organized racketeering, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to her victims. Mark faced additional charges when more of his involvement came to light. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay child support and restitution to all the children he'd been systematically alienated from their mothers. During the final sentencing, Sarah looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with such pure hatred that it made my skin crawl. She mouthed the words, "I'll find you when I get out." I mouthed back, "Good luck with that." The most incredible part of this whole experience was meeting the other women. We weren't crazy. We weren't unstable. We weren't bad mothers or wives. We were normal women who'd been systematically destroyed by a predator who had perfected her techniques over decades. Jennifer got to see her children again after 10 years. It took months of family therapy and legal intervention, but they eventually understood what had happened. Rachel regained partial custody of her daughter. Diana got her house back through the restitution payments and was able to rebuild her relationship with her children. We all healed together. We all supported each other through the legal process and the aftermath. We created a support network that extends far beyond just dealing with Sarah. We became genuine friends, sisters in survival. The thing that haunts me the most is this: how many Sarahs are out there right now? How many families are being destroyed by someone who seems like a concerned family member but is actually a manipulative predator? The signs are there if you know what to look for. They isolate you from your support system gradually. They make you question your own memories and perceptions. They create chaos and then position themselves as the solution. They turn your loved ones against you systematically. They always play the victim when confronted. They keep meticulous records to use against you later. And most importantly, they always have a long-term plan. Sarah's basement files weren't created in a moment of anger. They were the result of years of careful planning and documentation. After everything was over, I found out something that still gives me chills. Sarah had been doing this since she was young. She'd destroyed her own sister's marriage when they were in their 20s. Her sister had died alone, estranged from the family, never knowing why everyone had turned against her. She'd targeted Mark's father's second wife after Mark's biological mother died. She'd driven away Mark's stepmother when he was just 15, convincing his father that the woman was trying to turn Mark against him. This was Sarah's life's work. Destroying families wasn't a side effect of her personality disorders, it was her primary occupation. She got genuine pleasure from it. The basement in my house is now a bright, cheerful playroom. Emma and Jake have their toys down there, and their friends come over to play. Their laughter echoes through the space where someone once plotted to steal their mother from them. But sometimes, when I'm doing laundry down there, I remember what it used to be, a war room, a place where someone plotted to steal my children, my husband, my home, my entire identity and life. And then I remember that I won. We all won. Sarah is in prison, where she belongs. Mark is out of our lives permanently. My children are happy and healthy and learning to trust their instincts about people. The other survivors and I still stay in touch. We call ourselves the Phoenix Women now because we all rose from the ashes of what Sarah tried to do to us. We have a group chat, we meet annually, and we support each other through the ongoing healing process. Sometimes, when one of us is having a bad day, when the trauma feels overwhelming, when we start to doubt ourselves again, we remind each other of this truth. We survived. We fought back. We won. Sarah spent decades perfecting her system of family destruction. She thought she was untouchable, that her victims would always be too isolated and traumatized to fight back effectively. But in the end, she made one crucial mistake. She kept records. She documented her crimes meticulously, and that documentation became the evidence that destroyed her. The basement files she used to try to steal my life became the proof that sent her to prison for the rest of hers. Justice isn't always served. Predators don't always face consequences. But sometimes they do. And when they do, it's beautiful. Emma and Jake don't remember much about that time anymore. They know their father made bad choices and had to go away. But they don't carry the trauma of those months. They're resilient, happy kids who trust their instincts and know they're loved unconditionally. I've remarried now. A wonderful man named David who knew the whole story before he proposed. He understands why I need transparency, why I have security cameras in our home, why I run background checks on babysitters and housekeepers. The Phoenix Women were all at my wedding. Jennifer, Rachel, Diana, Mary, Lisa, and 7 others. We danced and laughed and celebrated not just my new beginning, but all of our survival. Sarah has 8 more years left on her sentence. She'll be 78 when she gets out if she lives that long. Prison has not been kind to her, according to the reports I received from the Victim Services Coordinator. But I'm not afraid of her anymore. None of us are. We know who she is now. We know her methods, and we know we're stronger together than she ever was alone. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring that bell. Because sometimes the victims do win. Sometimes justice is served. Sometimes the predators face consequences for their actions. And when they do, we celebrate.